Morning. My name is Bill, and this week I heard news of a shaky situation. I heard news this week of one of the largest mass shootings in my home country. And I was reminded that we live in a shaky world. Maybe you've heard news from your home country, political situations, news headlines, corrupt rulers, great injustices that leave us feeling shaky, searching for stability. Maybe you've heard news from your home country that you are reminded that this world is not as firm as we would hope. But maybe you've come here today and you've experienced a shaky situation personally. Maybe you're looking for a job. You might lose the one you have. And you're wondering what life will look like. Maybe you've received news from doctors and the doctors don't know what's wrong, or they've given you a diagnosis and you're reminded that life is shaky. Or you're trying hard in relationships and you're wondering, what will the future hold for me? And you doubt yourself and you wonder. Or you look everywhere for confidence, but you still feel empty and afraid. Or maybe you've come here today and you're begging for peace. You're filled with anger and resentment, and you find yourself in a shaky situation. Today, as we get into 1 Kings chapter 2, we're going to see how God works on shaky situations. And after we look at David's last words to his son Solomon, we're going to look at 4 shaky situations. And then we'll look at what that means for God's people throughout all time, and we'll apply it to our lives today. Will you pray with me as we get into God's word? God, we are thankful that we have time to be in your word. God, we know that this world is not as solid as we hope, and we find ourselves in shaky situations. And so, God, we pray right now that as we read your word, we would understand what it means about you, and God, how we can apply it to our lives. We pray all these things in agreement. Amen? Well, happy Father's Day. On this special Father's Day, we hear David's words of wisdom to his son Solomon as Solomon becomes king. And becoming king back then was a very big deal, because kings were God's vice regents. They were God's vice rulers. That the kings didn't have ultimate authority, but they represented God's ruling of God's people. And so to reject a king, to reject God's king, was to reject God himself. And so we're going to see David's last words in 2 parts. Part 1, and then part 2. And within part 2, we're going to see 4 shaky situations develop. And we're going to count down 4, 3, 2, 1 to see how God works out those shaky situations. So David's last words are this: stay faithful. He tells his son, some of his last words, stay faithful. Do you remember the last words of your dad? The last words of your grandfather? Last words are significantly powerful. So this is what David says. He doesn't say, make advantageous trade agreements, or make sure you work on the right relationships, or amass a whole bunch of money and collect wealth and have a state-of-the-art army. He doesn't say any of that. He says, stay faithful. Obey God. Let's read the last words of David to his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses. Do all this that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. Obedience leads to promise enjoyment. He says that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons pay close attention to their way, to walk before me in faithfulness with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. So the first way that David addresses a shaky situation in his parting words to his son Solomon, as Solomon becomes king, he says, stay faithful. Obey God. And if we can put a pause on the story of Solomon, maybe you've come here today facing a shaky situation. And if you're on shaky ground right now, are you disobeying God's commands right now? Do you know what to do, but you haven't done it yet? Is there an attitude or action that you know is outside of God's boundaries? And maybe at first you were heavily convicted, but over time, sometimes we make exceptions and excuses for continuing in disobedience. I can tell you disobedience leads to shaky ground. And so David focuses first internally. He tells Solomon, as you become king, stay faithful, obey God. We'll unpause the story now in Solomon. And then David turns secondarily. He says there's some internal issues, staying faithful to God. There's some external threats that are going on right now, some external shaky situations that need to be dealt with. And so, and this is where it becomes a complicated text, because what David says is stay faithful to God, obey God, and then he's going to talk about taking other people's lives. He's going to talk about eliminating threats and killing. There are four threats that we'll talk about. And we have to understand how important it is that the kings continue after David. Because you see, God has said there will be kings that continue after David that will eventually, through a long line of kings, there will be a messianic king, a perfect ruler that will bring God's kingdom to the earth and that will rule and provide stability for this shaky world. And this is the first generation after David to pass on the kingdom. In 2 Samuel 7, if you want to read with me on the screen, this is what God says to David. He says, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish. The Hebrew word kun, it means to make firm or to be firm or to make stable. He says, I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. And so when we see these four shaky situations, we have to think of the question, can those situations shake God's plan? Can they thwart what God is doing? And so to rebel against the king, remember, to rebel against God's king is to rebel against God. And we'll see over and over again that rebellion is costly. And so in reading and preparing for this, we can look at it two ways. That what David tells Solomon to do to eliminate these threats is naughty. He shouldn't have done it. But we also see that it could be necessary in an imperfect world. Let me give you an example. My wife and I were traveling in Barbados, and we had rented this hotel room, and our plan was to have a romantic getaway in Barbados until we saw a shaky situation that was on the floor. It was about this big, and it had a bunch of legs. And we saw this threat to our plan, this cockroach. And you know what my wife said? Kill it. She said, kill it. Right away, kill it. And I said, oh, no, honey, surely we don't have to kill it. This is fascinating. So I scooped it up in between two glasses of the hotel room, and I held it up, and it was about the size of a small bird at this point, and it kept spinning around the glasses, running around. And she said, kill it. And I thought, surely I can just remove it, and it won't bother us anymore. And then I don't know if it's because I pushed the glasses together too hard, or if the cockroach that was like the size of a cat or a small dog busted out of the glasses and just ran right into our suitcases. The whole time my wife is saying, kill it. It was a threat to our plan. And so we remove the suitcases and we start trying to find this cockroach. But you know what? We never eliminated the threat because we never found it. And so the whole night we were lying in bed wondering if this cockroach was going to crawl all over us. If we didn't eliminate the threat was still there and ruined our plans. And so we see that this rebellion against God's king is so significant because God's plan is so important. And David says, Solomon, you need to eliminate these threats to God's plan for God's king. And then verse 10, after he shares his final words, it says, David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. There's that word again. His kingdom was firmly established. And so after we see David's two parts of his final words to his son Solomon, now we're going to get to the 4 shaky situations, and we're going to count down. We're going to count down. So let's practice. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ready? You two in overflow. And if you're online, just count with us. Ready? Here we go. We're going to count down. Ready? 4, 3, 2, 1. You're brilliant. Oh, that's so good. That'll come in handy later. All right? So 4 shaky situations. By the way, this stage is shaky for the worship team. This is a shaky stage. I'm not joking. So the first of the 4 shaky situations was with Adonijah. We talked a lot about Adonijah last week. Adonijah wanted the throne. Adonijah was Solomon's brother. He said, no, the throne is mine. I'm going to take it. Solomon was God's king, so Adonijah did all these ways, brought all these people on board to try and take the throne by force, and yet it was Solomon's all along. And Solomon, or Adonijah, you remember last week, Adonijah runs to the horns of the altar. He says, don't kill me. He's holding on to the horns of the altar. And Solomon says, okay, who's the king? We'll see in your actions. We'll see in your actions if you will follow the king. And we see Adonijah pop up in this passage. Adonijah goes to Solomon, or he actually goes to Bathsheba, Solomon's mom. He says, Bathsheba, I just have a request. I'd like Abishag as my wife. And you see, at that time, the customs back then are different than the customs now. Normally, we don't pass wives from one person to another and whatnot. But culturally, what would happen at that time is that the women of one king would become the women of another king. So Abishag, that's with David, is Solomon's, but Adonijah asks for Abishag as a wife. And when he asks for Abishag as a wife, he's not just saying, oh, it'd be really nice to have a pretty girl. No, what he's saying is, I want the kingdom. I want the throne. Maybe I could just wear a crown. Maybe I could just wear a ring or a robe. He's asking for the kingdom. And Bathsheba knows. Bathsheba knows exactly what his motives are. And she goes to Solomon, and she tells him, knowing how Solomon will react. Rebellion is costly. And Solomon is a man of his word. In verse 24, the words that he just spoke says, "Now, as the Lord lives, he who has established me and placed me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. There can only be one king. And Solomon had given Adonijah a chance, saying, "Who is the king?" And Adonijah again rebels and says, "Well, no, I want to take this." And so there's the consequence of his rebellion, that he's killed. So that's the first of 4 of the shaky situations that God establishes Solomon's rule. So after 4, let's count down. 4, 3. There's 3 more to go. Abiathar, the priest. Abiathar was in cahoots with Adonijah. Abiathar was controlling a bunch of religious folks. He had religious influence. And Abiathar, Solomon says, "Abiathar, I'm going to ask you, who is the king?" Because there can only be one king. And Abiathar is guilty by association. He's associated with people that are rebelling. And so he has a consequence as well. Let me tell you real quick about guilt by association. My sister and I were inside one time as we were kids. And my sister has long, beautiful brown hair. And she had 2 pigtails, one on either side. And it was about 1 meter long, just thick hair. And I thought it would be fun to go up to her hair and just snip one of them off at the skull. She got me back. No, just joking. And I decided to clip it off. And so we schemed together and conspired so that neither of us would get in trouble, so that when my mom came in, she looked at my sister and she looked at me and she said, "What happened?" And I said, "I don't know." And then she looked at my sister and she said, "What happened?" And because we had worked out a plan, my sister goes, "I don't know." She was guilty by association. She got in trouble too. Well, Abiathar has been conspiring as well, and so he's guilty by association. And Solomon says to him, well, let's read what God's word says. Verse 26, "And to Abiathar the priest, the king said, 'Go to Anathoth, to your estate, for you deserve death. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before David my father, and because you shared in all my father's affliction.'" So Solomon, instead of killing him, still shows us the picture that rebellion is costly. Verse 27, "So Solomon expelled Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh." So Abiathar was guilty by association, and rebellion is quite costly, isn't it? Because there can only be one king. So number 4 is Adonijah. Number 3 is Abiathar. You ready to count down with me to 2? Here we go. Ready? You in the overflow as well. Ready? Here we go. 4, 3, 2. There's 2 left. 2 shaky situations. The second to last is Joab. Now, Joab hears what's going on. These other 2 shaky situations have been dealt with. Joab hears what's going on and goes, "Oh, I'm in trouble." I mean, Joab, who is a military leader, he couldn't be trusted. He avenged time in a time of peace, blood that was shed in war. He had conspired as well. And so he goes to the horns of the altar again. That was a great place. It provided sanctuary for those guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but not for those guilty of premeditated or intentional murder. So he's been given chance. Who is king? And he has sided with Adonijah, not with Solomon. And we'll see too in his place that rebellion is quite costly. Read in verse 32 with me. It says, the Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because without the knowledge of my father David, by the way, David could have handled this in his reign, but he didn't. So he passes it off to Solomon. So without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked and killed with the sword 2 men more righteous and better than himself. Abner, the son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, the son... I was reading off this. Amasa, the son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood come back on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But for David and his descendants, and for his house and for his throne, there shall be peace from the Lord forevermore. And we see Solomon as a man of his word, and Solomon had Joab killed. The Joab who could have been on Solomon's side chose to rebel, and rebellion is quite costly. And he is killed as well. So here are the rebels. There's Adonijah that's been killed. There's Abiathar that's been expelled. Joab's been killed. You ready to count down with me? Here we go. Ready? Overflow as well. Here we go. 4, 3, 2, 1. The last one. The very last person. We might say, well, what about Shimmy, this last guy? Do you think that God's plan can be shaken through him? No. Well, let's look. And the Shimei was a very vocal opponent of David, Solomon's dad. He was very vocal. He would speak out against it. I imagine he would be whispering in the corners, trying to spread bad news. And Shimei was going, I can't believe this, I can't believe that. He was always speaking against David. In fact, David saw through Shimei's pledge of allegiance to him earlier on, and he knows that he is a threat to the kingdom, that he will not say Solomon is king and I support Solomon, but instead he will try everything he can to follow someone else. Rebellion is quite costly, but look what Solomon does. Solomon doesn't go and kill him right away. Solomon gives him the chance to answer the question, who is king? Solomon says, you know what, Shimei? I'm putting you under house arrest. Okay, you have to stay within Jerusalem. If you leave Jerusalem, guess what? You're dead. All right, so he looks at Shimei and he goes, I'm watching you and how you answer this question, who is king? I tell you, if you leave, you will die. And after 3 years, Shimei, in a sense, goes, Solomon, surely he's not watching me anymore. I can leave the house. Who are you to tell me what to do? I'm going to go out and I'm going to go get some slaves and you can't tell me what to do. Well, Solomon hears about this. And you can imagine he's not happy. His boundary was crossed. In verse 44, read with me. The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the harm that you did to David my father, so the Lord will bring back your harm on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. We see that rebellion is quite costly. You ready to count down? Those are the 4 threats that have been eliminated because of rebellion that has been costly. It cost 3 guys their life, and 1 guy was banished. Let's count down. Here we go. Ready? 4, 3, 2, 1. And this is where we get to the big idea of our passage. And I want you to stand up with me. So everyone in your seat, overflow room, at home if you're watching, stand up in right where you are. Now, I don't want you to stand like this. We've been talking this whole time about being firmly established, to be made firm. So I want you to stand firm. I want you to stand rooted, grounded. I'm not going to have people push you from behind, although that's a thought. Stand firm as we get to the main idea of this passage, all right? It's the very last line. But I want you to sway back and forth with me. Feel the ground under your feet. Does it feel firm? All right, now get on your chair and do the same. No, don't do that. All right, because it's not firm. It's not established. All right, let's read the big idea. It says, so the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. All right, so the kingdom was what? Established in the hand of Solomon. And we see in this story that God established the kingdom. You can have a seat, by the way. As we talk about what this means for God's plan, because the star of this story isn't Solomon, although Solomon is a prominent character. The star in the Bible is God. It's his plans, it's his reign, it's his rule, it's his story. And so when Jesus, the King of Kings, the Messianic Messiah, the one who was coming to the world to provide stability and God's kingdom, when Jesus finally came, many years after this, when Jesus came from the line of David, the King of Kings, could death shake God's plan? Absolutely not. Because our King of Kings is unshakable. Because God's plan through the King of Kings is unshakable. And he comes back to life, providing us new life. So friends, we know not only did God establish his kingdom in the past, but God establishes his kingdom for his people, even in the midst of rebellion of others. Even in the midst of rebellion that is extremely costly. Even through severe means. That Jesus died for our rebellion so that we wouldn't have to die. And we know that's not the end of the story. Now, we have an unshakable king with an unshakable plan, that Jesus has come and will come again to complete the story. The final chapter, the last scene, the closing remarks is that Jesus wins. That Jesus will come to finalize the kingdom of God. And we wait and we pray, come, Lord Jesus. And while we wait for him to come back, there's one question that we have. Who is king? Who is king? Rebellion will lead to shaky situations. Who do you say the king is of your life? Who's the ruler in your heart? Who's the boss of your schedule, of your motives, all that you are? You may have come here today and for the first time heard about Jesus, the King of Kings. And you may feel like a rebel. But I have to tell you, Jesus died in our place. So we can be included in God's unshakable kingdom by putting our trust in the King of Kings. And if you've never done that before, I'm going to give you an opportunity in a couple minutes to do so. But if you've come here today and you say, yes, I follow the King of Kings in God's unshakable kingdom. Yes, I know that rebellion is quite costly. I know that Jesus has paid the price. I still face shaky situations, though. I want to encourage you. If you have lost your job or you're looking for a job, know that no bank account, no employer, no resume or CV will establish you like the unshakable King of Kings. That we would trust, that we would find stability in the unshakable King of Kings, not our own efforts. Last week, a group of people got together in one of our small classrooms. We had about 20 people in the class, packed shoulder to shoulder. People getting ready for baptism, making a public profession of an inward change from being taken of being shaky on shaky ground to trusting in the unshakable King of Kings and now standing firm. And we got so wrapped up in our meeting of hearing how amazing God was at work that we had to pause and pray, thanking God for how amazing he is. I want to encourage you by some of the stories that we heard. If you've come here today and you're facing a medical diagnosis and the doctors have given you something that you're not happy with or that has shaken your world, or there's a big question mark and you're feeling anxious, listen to this. Somebody said, Lord, my body might not be complete, but I have you in my life. Now I am complete. Oh, those words sound like someone finding their security in the unshakable King of Kings, don't they? If you've been looking for confidence but you're feeling empty, listen to this. Somebody said, now I know what joy means and what real happiness is. My way of living changed and also my relationship with people. I'm not afraid anymore because I know Jesus will always have my back. Those sound like words from someone finding their security in the unshakable King of Kings, don't they? Lastly, if you've come here today and you're searching for peace, you may be filled with anger and resentment. Here's what somebody said. I have a peace that requires looking after, but the anxiety is better. The anger is gone, and all I am now is thankful for God's mercy and grace and love. Those sound like words from someone finding their security in the unshakable King of Kings, don't they? So whatever you're going through right now, know that we have security in the unshakable King of Kings. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. God, we are thankful that we can come to you, that you teach us and instruct us, that you comfort us, that you convict us. God, help us to obey your word, but also help us to be comforted by it as well. If you've come here today and you have been looking for stability and peace, and you've never put your trust in Jesus, just take a quiet time out with God right now and pray after me. God, I know that I'm a sinner, a rebel. God, I know that rebellion is costly. Today, I trust Jesus' death and resurrection. That he died in my place. I make him my Lord and Savior, the boss of my life today, so that I may be called one of your dearly loved kingdom citizens. God, for those of us that have prayed that prayer and we've been radically changed, I pray that you would continue to remind us of your faithfulness, of your unshakable King. God, that while we didn't deserve it, that the cost of our rebellion was paid in full. So God, today remind us as we sing this closing song, remind us of your faithfulness, that you have always been there and you will always be there. Your unshakable kingdom. We love you, God. And everyone agreed together by saying amen. Amen.